let's go ahead and overlap this blue sinusoidal graph here at the bottom. And in this case, we're going to use a cosine graph, and we're going to use all of our transformations, our amplitude, our b-value, our phase shift, and a midline. Now, as you've seen, if you've seen my other videos, man, I go straight after the low-hanging fruit. I go after the easy ones. I'm going to find that midline, and I'm going to draw that in. If you notice, that midline comes across right there. It looks right there at -5, the top and the bottom are the same. And I'm going to put that in the position of where the midline is, which is right where K is. So I'm going to put -5 there. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on that cosine graph just to make sure it looks like it should line up. And it does. Okay. Once I've got that midline figured out, I type in y equals -5. Because I want that there for my calculations. It's going to make my life a lot easier. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the amplitude. That's the second easiest one there. So remember amplitude, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the middle at the midline. And once I've got that midline, I'm going to either count up to the crest or I'm going to count down to the trough. And you can count that up. Each block represents 1. So 1, 2, 3, and you can check again. 1, 2, 3. There's other ways, but that seems to be a really easy way for these types of problems. So I'm going to put that amplitude of 3 right where A is, which is right up in the front of the cosine. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to turn on that graph so I can see if it goes as high and as low to those maximums. You can see the top of the green graph is that the top where the top of the blue is. And the bottom of the green graph goes as low as the bottom of the blue. So we are in good shape right now. Now, what we are going to do now is I am going to go ahead and find our b value. Remember, the b value is the number of periods in 2 pi. And we're going to use this with cosine. So we're going to find the length of 1 period. Now, one thing we should remember is if we're looking at cosine, I'll bring up that green graph to show us cosine. Cosine starts at a peak right on the y axis. Okay, so we're going to be looking for peaks and valleys with cosines. So I'm going to look for a peak on this one. I'm going to turn off the green graph. And when I do that, I'm going to look for a peak and I'm going to go ahead and just follow it along right there. You can see a peak right here of pi over 6 and a peak right there of 2 pi over 3. And you can see that that is a period, and the reason why is because we start at the top, we work all the way down to the bottom, and then we go all the way back up the top. So what we're really looking for is the distance between these 2 points. Well, how do we find the distance between those 2 points? We subtract them. So I'm going to write 2 pi over 3, and I'm going to subtract off pi over 6. Well, what do we do? In order to subtract these, I'm going to have to multiply that denominator of 3 by 2, and that'll give me a denominator 6. So what I get is 4 pi over 6 minus 1 pi over 6, and 4 pi minus 1 pi is going to be 3 pi over 6, and that can simplify by dividing by 3, and that is going to be 3 divided by 3, which is pi, and 6 divided by 3, which is 2. So the period is going to be pi over 2. But here's the problem. That's not what we put in our equation. We put the b value, which is the number of periods in 2 pi. And so what we have to do is we need to take 2 pi and divide it by the period. So I'm going to write it like that. I'm going to write 2 pi divided by pi over 2. Okay, well, we're dividing by a fraction, so it's 2 pi times, we flip the fraction, pi over 2 becomes 2 over pi. Now check it out. The pi's will cancel, and 2 times 2 is 4. And guess what? This is our b value. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that value of 4, and I'm going to plug it in right in the front there. So let's go and do that. I'm going to put 4 there. Now, what we're going to do when we look for this to verify it's right, we're going to make sure that they look like they are going through the cycle following the same pattern. Check it out. Let's look at it. Oh, let's turn it on. It's hard to see, but you can see that the blue graph and the green graph are oscillating approximately the same, or in what we've calculated, the exact same. Now what we want to do is we want to shift. Okay, Now, when we shift this, this is going to be our phase shift. That's what we're going to look for. We're going to find our phase shift right here. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to start on the green graph, the cosine graph. And remember, cosine starts at a peak. Well, guess what? There's lots of peaks, lots and lots of peaks. I've got a peak right here on the blue graph. I've got a peak right here on the blue graph. I've got a peak right here on the blue graph. And I've got a peak right there on the blue graph. And what that means is I can take this one, this pink point right here at the top of the original cosine, and I can shift it to any one of those points that I want to. So how we're going to do that is I'm going to click on the maximum of this one, which is pi over 6 and -2. What I'm doing is I'm going to shift this pink point over to pi over 6. Well, how do I move it right? I put subtract. So I put minus pi over 6. Guess what? It moves it over there. Well, some people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. How did you pick that one point? Guess what? I can pick millions of points. I can come to this one. I can say, hey, look, let's go to 2 pi over 3. Let's take that original point, go to 2 pi over 3. So I'm now taking this point, and instead of going to that first one, I'm going to the second one, which was 2 pi over 3. Well, let's do that. I'm still moving it right. So I'm going to put minus 2 pi over 3. And guess what? It still shows up. And then some people are like, wait a second, does it only go to those two? Well, guess what? I can come over to here. I can click on this one too. I can find that one. I can say, hey, let's go to 7 pi over 6. Guess what? Well, let's do it. You bet you know what the answer is going to be, 7 pi over 6. It still moves it there. And then some people, does it only work if I subtract? Come on, guys. You know this. You know what I'm about to do. I'm about to change it up. I'm going to take that original point, right? Let's go back there and let's move it to the left. Because guess what? There's lots of maximums on this. So let's move it to the left. We can move it from here that way. Okay. Let's click on that graph and let's click on it. Let's find it out. That is negative pi over 3. And the only thing we got to do is if we move it left, we're not subtracting, we're now adding. So I'm going to put plus pi over 3. There's lots of ways to do this. So that's how we write these equations. We start with our midline, go to our amplitude. We got to find our period so we know the B value. And then we can start picking points for the phase shift. Hope that helps. And just remember, when you do a phase shift, there are lots and lots of numbers you can put in there to make